Since my first album back in 1971, I primarily did music as a hobby. I taught myself songs I learned off the radio, everything from Joan Baez's songs.
With every fiery note she plays, she wears the crown of slide guitar royalty, a flame-haired force of nature whose voice soothes like velvet but cuts like steel when provoked. In a world where men often set the rules, Bonnie Raitt carved her legacy through sheer grace, not by stirring headlines but by standing tall. Yet today she upended expectations. For the very first time, Bonnie broke her silence. Instead of veiled hints or sidesteps, she spoke plainly, revealing 6 names she's long kept in her shadows. These aren't enemies from ego-fueled squabbles. They're reminders of betrayal, bruised trust, and the uphill battle of earning respect. Forget whispers and clickbait. This isn't a tabloid confession. It's the raw kind of truth Bonnie has always poured into her music, line by line, tear by tear. Each person named carries a chapter she's long kept shut, until this moment. She begins with a name that still unsettles her, the one that stings whenever an old track rolls into shuffle mode. That name, the first to twist her gut when it flickers across a screen, is Eric Clapton. There was a time she saw him not just as a peer, but maybe even a soulmate in the blues. But that hopeful kinship was the first to crumble. Back in the 70s, she admired the way he bent strings into fire, the soul in his solos, the edge in his timing. He brought storm and electricity to his playing, raw, captivating. But behind all the showmanship and praise, a colder current ran beneath. In private moments, he didn't just overlook her, he diminished her presence. He made it clear she was not part of the inner circle, not in his league. To him, she was a novelty, not a contender. A woman with a guitar, not a threat. On camera and backstage, he'd cut her off, dismiss her insights, and steal the air from any room they shared. There was one instance, casual yet cutting, that stuck like a thorn. He once told someone they both knew that Bonnie was too nice to be true blues. It wasn't just a jab, it was a complete dismissal of her pain, her authenticity, as if sorrow had to roar to be real, as if a woman's heartbreak lacked credibility. And that attitude didn't vanish with the last song. It lingered in every shared moment. Bonnie, ever poised, kept her dignity, though each interaction left a mark. In time, she chose to walk away. Not because she was scared, because she was done. They haven't exchanged a word in decades. And she plans to keep it that way. Because some doors don't deserve to be reopened, and some music is best left in silence. But Eric wasn't the only one who misjudged her. Another name etched with deeper resentment came next. Someone she once tried to collaborate with. Her list wouldn't be complete without John Mayer, a partnership that soured too quickly. When Mayer burst into the blues world, Bonnie paid attention. There was no denying his skill. Crisp technique, clever tone, undeniable command. There was something in him she couldn't ignore. A spark, a promise, maybe even a new voice for the genre. To keep momentum alive, it's crucial to challenge ourselves and stay creatively hungry. Whenever a song grabs your spirit like that infectious Lost Slobo track Shakin' Shakes, it becomes a reason to chase inspiration. Moved by that feeling, she reached out. What she expected was a partnership. What she encountered was pride in disguise. From their first real encounter, Mayer's attitude revealed itself. Aloof, condescending. On stage, he behaved like royalty, as though the spotlight belonged solely to him. Rather than engaging with authenticity, he basked in the glow of admiration. Bonnie invited him on stage at a festival, hoping for musical connection. Instead, the moment was stolen. He seized control, played over everyone, and missed every cue to end it. When the audience applauded the set's unity, he slipped away, silent and self-satisfied. He didn't say thank you, didn't share the credit. The next day, he downplayed the entire performance in Rolling Stone, calling it a drag. That wasn't a minor slight, it cut deep. She had opened the door and he had slammed it shut behind himself. That was his final invite. To Bonnie, music wasn't just a job, it was about poise and mutual respect. Leadership to her meant knowing when to step forward and when to make room for others. But Mayer never took the time to hear anyone but himself. After that, the admiration curdled into coldness, and the silence between them became permanent. Then there was another figure, once admired from afar but painfully disappointing in person. Don Henley. Sharp wardrobe, sharper edge. Henley strode through rooms like they belonged to him, and spoke like the people did too. Bonnie had long admired his work with the Eagles. Who wouldn't? The harmonies, the songwriting, the effortless cool. But offstage, that detachment had an icier flavor. They found themselves on the same bill for several charity concerts in the late 80s. Bonnie arrived eager to collaborate. Henley showed up ready to dictate. During rehearsals, he interrupted her mid-thought and waved off her musical suggestions with a smirk. At one point, he leaned in, smirking again, and said, "You should smile more when you're up there. It softens you." Bonnie stood there, still. Not because it was new, it wasn't, but because it came from someone she'd once held in such high regard. And she knew without a doubt he'd never dare say that to Springsteen or Petty or Clapton. It wasn't just the sentence, it was the stare that said she didn't matter. Every compliment came with a twist of superiority. It didn't shout, but it struck. She finished that tour carrying wounds that no one could point to. And that moment stayed with her like a thorn under skin. Not life-threatening, just impossible to ignore. Right after Henley, the next name didn't sting the same way. It pierced deeper because he didn't just offend, he exploited her. What followed wasn't just another blow. It was betrayal, laced with deceit. That man was Ted Nugent. They first encountered each other during a charity tour in the early 90s, where Bonnie expected unity and purpose, not drama. She joined with her heart open, believing it was a cause that rose above division, a night where music could be healing. Instead, she walked into chaos. Nugent had overtaken the event, turning the stage into a platform for personal tirades and anger. He ranted about politics, weapons, and his own battles. It had nothing to do with art. It became ammunition. From backstage, Bonnie watched her ideals get twisted into something she couldn't stand behind. She felt ambushed, misled, as if her name had been tied to a cause she never meant to represent. After just 2 performances, she exited, quietly, but with resolve and finality. But Nugent wouldn't let her leave in peace. In interviews, he jeered at her, claiming she was too soft to face the real America. He didn't just dismiss her, he tried to erase her stance, making her look like she lacked courage. He tried to rewrite her choice, making morality seem like a weakness instead of a stand for truth. Yet Bonnie remained firm. She didn't turn around or let regret creep in. For her, the guitar wasn't just for sound, it was both armor and amplifier. No performance opportunity was worth it if it meant being complicit in silencing her own voice. Then there was someone whose harm came quietly, wrapped in silence rather than shouting. That shadow belonged to Van Morrison. Bonnie had long admired his early work, describing his voice as something like twilight. Soft, rich, and just a little haunted. She'd play his records during lonely tour nights, letting the music wrap around her like familiar perfume. But when she finally met the man, everything she believed about him began to crumble. They were scheduled for a joint performance in London, and Bonnie entered with admiration and optimism. Yet Morrison gave nothing. No words, no eye contact, no acknowledgement of her presence. He declined to rehearse with her, delivered messages through intermediaries, and walked past her like she didn't exist. And to top it off, he reportedly told her manager she was suitable enough to open for him. As though her decades of artistry and recognition could be reduced to a warm-up. Bonnie didn't confront him. She let her silence speak instead of her anger. When the time came, she walked onto that stage and delivered a performance so powerful it cracked the air. Her strings screamed, her voice soared, and the audience, starved for authenticity, rose to their feet. She later stood in the shadows, watching him play a technically sound set that left the room emotionally flat. By then, the crowd had made its choice. They weren't just moved, they were changed. That night taught her something deep. Silence can carry as much cruelty as the loudest insult. But the final name? That one left a bitter sting that never quite faded. The name was Kid Rock. Talent was never the point. What mattered more were principles. The spotlight could be shared, but the respect that should accompany it often never arrived. When she found herself listed on the same festival lineup in the summer of 2005, Bonnie already sensed the storm she was stepping into. Yet the discomfort still caught her off guard. Long before her cue, she made sure to ask for her own dressing space. It wasn't vanity driving that choice. It was self-respect. She'd already witnessed the atmosphere he cultivated behind the scenes. The off-color humor, the way he ordered the crew around like servants, the beer-soaked bravado laced with superiority, the dismissive, objectifying way he scanned every woman. He moved through the venue with the overbearing swagger of someone who believed celebrity gave him a free pass to mistreat others. Later that evening, after her performance had drawn silence from thousands, after her voice had peeled back layers of truth from the crowd, he leaned toward a promoter and scoffed. "Does she always go that deep?" he said with a smirk. Bonnie offered no glance, no retort. She simply gathered her things and stepped away from the venue. And she's never taken the stage with him again. Even now, she refers to that gig as the most gutting experience of her performing life. Not because of his behavior alone, but because of what it stood for. A culture where noise buries nuance, where fake confidence steamrolls genuine artistry. And Bonnie, though unshakably grounded, understood that if she didn't name what happened, she'd be conceding to that broken system. Bonnie Raitt has always kept it clean. But she hasn't forgotten the grime. These aren't old grudges, they're lived-in wounds. Every individual she mentions ties back to a night where her presence was minimized, her skill overlooked, her passion ignored. Behind the applause lived quiet pain. Even while holding Grammys and basking in praise, people still told her to tone it down, to play nice, to not ruffle feathers. Yet Bonnie never fit that mold. She built her own trail. One hand on the strings, the other holding steady. The days of polite silence are over. She's not softening her truth anymore, nor pretending that dignity means swallowing injustice. This time, she didn't just whisper, she shouted, with purpose and with heat. This wasn't for drama, but for clarity. For Bonnie, speaking her truth has always echoed louder than fame ever could. And in a world where cheers often come cheaper than principles, she reached again for the one constant in her life: honesty. She didn't call out names for vengeance. She did it to demand accountability, because silence never protected her. Not on the microphone, and not in the margins of her life. In Bonnie Raitt's universe, truth still outshines applause.